Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm going to call to order this special meeting of the Perrysburg Board of Education on Thursday, June 27th, 2024. Mr. Dreyer, roll call, please.
Ms. Larimer.
Here.
Ms. Minke. Dr. Reffert.
Here.
Ms. Roland Miller.
Here.
Mr. Bennington.
Here. I ask that we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's nice to see we have quite a few guests tonight on a nice Thursday evening here, so I will start with a safety briefing. Perrysburg Schools welcomes you to the Commodore Building, and we thank you for attending tonight's Board of Education meeting. We care about the safety of our students, staff, families, and guests. Please note that there are exits on both the east and west sides of the cafeteria. In case of an emergency, an AED is located just outside the cafeteria doors. You are located at 140 East Indiana Avenue. Thank you for joining us tonight and supporting Perrysburg Schools. Next item, can I have a motion to adopt the proposed agenda?
So moved. Second.
Dr. Reffert, Ms. Larimer. And roll call, please.
Dr. Reffert.
Yes.
Ms. Larimer.
Yes.
Ms. Roland Miller.
Yes.
Ms. Minke.
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes, the agenda is passed. So next we will turn it over to a superintendent and treasurer presentation from Mr. Hostler and Mr. Dreyer. You have the floor.
Well, thank you. The presentation this evening has 50 slides, but don't be worried. We're not going to go through all of them. So many of the slides are from the last board meeting where there was an in-depth presentation and discussion about the various options. So we transferred many of those slides as a reference tool. So if you have a question or want to see something from the last meeting, we'll be able to find it. So we wanted to begin with a summary kind of the last meeting on June 17th. And so just to give a little bit of a background, we have a 5-year incremental levy that was passed in November of 2019 that is set to expire. Currently, it brings in $13.5 million a year, and it represents about 17% of our annual budget. Pulling from Mr. Dreyer's 5-year forecast, with this levy going away, we show a deficit going out 5 years to the district, and it's represented here in the red. To pull out of that deficit, we did a quick estimate, and it would impact approximately 130 employees. How that levy behaved, being an incremental levy over 5 years, in the first column on the left, it shows the 5 years that this levy was being collected. The second column from the left shows what the ballot language displayed when folks voted in terms of the estimate of how many mills it would be required to collect that amount based on the valuation at the time of the election. The middle column here, the effective millage rate, shows the actual millage that was needed to collect that amount. As the community grows, the valuations increase in the community, the amount needed to collect that specific dollar amount the voters approved was far less than what was shown in the ballot language. So over the course of 5 years, to the total impact in terms of the number of mills was 1.95 from the first year to the last year. Going back to the 3 options that were discussed the most, and at the end of the meeting, you might recall, I kind of said, I just want to make sure I capture everything, and this is what I had in my notes. I read that back to the board members, but there were 3 options that were primarily discussed, option A, C, and D, and you can see a summary of each of those options. and also where board members were at that moment in time. And you can see that there are different names with different options. And I think the conversation was very fluid in terms of people discussing and questioning and understanding what each of these options meant. And so people had different ideas, and you could see that evolve as the conversation took place. This is a kind of a summary based on the number of years that we have kind of laid out, starting in 2024 and going out to 2033. And it takes each of those options and lays out events that will happen. So you can see in 2024, the different renewal in option A, replacement in C and D. We know next year we have a permanent improvement levy that is set to expire. That's a 5-year levy that's been on the books since 1980. Every 5 years, it generates about $1.5 million. And then you can see how that falls with the calendar here. Excuse me. And we have the incremental levy increase comparison between $1.5 million and $2 million per year for a $100,000 home value. And you can see it's $3.15 per month for $1.5 million increase, which is the amount that has increased over the last 5 years. And for $2 million, it's 1.44 mils for $4.20 per month. And also, we just talked about the incremental levy increasing over the course of 5 years, 1.95 mils total. So the incremental levy, Perrysburg is one of the districts where it shows how that can work to the benefit. As the community grows, you're capturing that growth in terms of what everybody needs to pay to hitting that dollar amount. On December 31st, 2024, the 1.85 debt mills that are set to retire from Perrysburg High School, so those will be coming off the books. They'll be collected that following year, but on December 31st of this year, it's done. So that's 1.85 mils that will be no longer collected, and so that's an important factor. We wanted to pull together some key data for consideration. And again, this is a summary of all the different, again, we wanted things to be available for board members' discussion today. This is a summary of all the options that were discussed last time, not just the ones that board members said, yes, this is the one I'm most interested in. One of the things that we wanted to again, share is what was at the last board meeting was kind of a history going back to 2006 of the election cycles and the number of voters in each of those elections. And then if there was a school issue attached to that, and you can kind of see the history there. Over the last 5 years, the expiring levy has increased 1.5 million per year. We've talked about that. The projected budget for next year is $79.7 million. And so when you begin to think about the impact of $2 million, that was the uppermost discussed at the last board meeting. The impact that has, in terms of the amount of money on the budget, and then looking at comparing it to the CPI, inflation right now, you can see how those things line up. I think it's important too that throughout the last conversation, there was this kind of discussion of challenges. And these challenges were really woven through the conversations that board members had, and we kind of pulled these things out and wanted to share them back with the board. We hear sometimes, planning for the future. District, let's live within the means and let's understand what we need to do and operate that way. And that's something that we hear. And I think it's important to share some of the challenges of what it is like to plan for the future in a school. So we understand that in the next 8 years, there will be 2 elections for governor in terms of who will control the public education. So with the DEW, we know that the governor now controls education more than they ever have in the state of Ohio. So any programs or any types of initiatives are much more easily implemented because it goes through the governor's office and not through a state board of education. We don't know what those mandates may be or what those changes may be. But certainly that direction can change as the governor changes. And we know that we will have a new governor in the next election cycle. We also understand that state funding has a lot to do with what districts can and can't do. 609 school districts in Ohio, all of them receive state funding at different levels. And we know that there will be 3 biennium budgets. So the state budgets 2 years at a time. They require all of us here to budget 5 years out with a 5-year forecast, but they only have a 2-year budget at a time. So in the next 8 years, we will have 3 different biennium budgets. So we have no idea exactly what will change. Right now, we're in the second phase-in of the current school funding model that we have. We have no idea if that will continue in the next biennium budget, if it will change, or if there will be a different kind of formula that will be introduced, or freeze, or any of those kinds of things. There will be 3 local school board elections that will take place in the next 8 years. And we know that land in the city and the 2 townships will continue to be developed, and that still will happen. We still have a need for long-term planning and execution when it comes to our facilities. We know that students are continuing to come to Perrysburg. We know that land is still available to be developed, and we know that we've run out of space, especially at the elementary level and the high school level. And so where do these things all converge? So in the next 8 years, we have an unprecedented number of unknowns. And this, again, using that kind of calendar in terms of the year layout, you can see how these things line up. So as we talk about renewals and putting it on the ballot this year or that year, understand that these are all things that are going to impact planning for the future and what that looks like. There's 2 articles I wanted to highlight. This appeared June 22nd in the Blade, and it was an editorial talking about the need to support Perrysburg schools, the value that it brings not only to this community, but also to the region. And so it certainly was an important editorial that caught us by surprise when we read it. And then just recently, within the last 24 hours, the headline kind of says it all. So as we begin to talk about the future, we continue to talk about these unknowns that are there, and how do we deal with those? How do we plan for those? How do we take things, 284 housing units that are going to come, that are going to bring more kids? How do we plan for those things as we go forward in terms of scheduling things like levies, bond issues, and what we need to do? I think the one thing that I think is important as we talk about this discussion is what is best for the students that we serve. We hear all the time about what is best for, the district. We hear what's best for the community, what's best for the taxpayers. But the one thing that we want to keep in the forefront is what is best for the students that we serve. And one of the things that I heard from the conversation from all 5 board members was that there needs to be a transparent, a predictable, and reliable funding stream that the district can count on as we move forward. And the reason why that is so important is because of all the things that we've just covered. The 3 biennium budgets, 2 elections with potentially new governors. What does the future hold? And how do we have a funding mechanism that we can count on that's predictable and reliable? Because we can't predict or necessarily rely on what's going to come out of Columbus, but we can here. And I think that really was an important part of the conversation. Finally, what decisions will most benefit the students we serve. We take very seriously that we're here to ensure all students achieve their greatest potential. That's something that the board has adopted and has said, this is what we do. And when we poll our staff and say, what is that mission? I'm very proud of the fact that our staff knows that. It's something that guides us. And I think as we go forward, we want to make sure that we're keeping that in mind as we talk about what decisions are going to make sure that that is happening for us as we move forward. So as I mentioned, we have other slides available for review from the last board meeting. And, you know, we'll certainly hand it off to the board for discussion and consideration. Mr. Dreer, I don't know if there's anything that you'd like to add before we turn it over.
Amen.
So, thanks. So, as we wrapped up the meeting the last time, we talked about, you know, just how proud we were of the process. And this is now, I think, the fourth meeting where the board has wrestled with this issue. It's, you know, you can see the evolution of conversations and ideas, information being pulled, and I think it reflects the importance of the discussion, the impact it has not only on our students, our staff, but our families and community members. I also think that it shows that this board is you know, working very hard to come to their own conclusions about what is best for the students that we serve. And I think that's to be certainly applauded. So with that, Mr. President, we'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hustler, for the presentation there, a good summary of what we have done. And as you pointed out, this is now our fourth time getting together to talk about this. And we've started with kind of a couple meetings just to do some information gathering and get some questions answered. Our last regular meeting, kind of the language I used was, let's start to transition that conversation to a closing conversation, and that's what we're here for today, is to make a decision. I think, again, this is what we talked about last time. Nobody on this board had a desire to make the current levy go away, to make those funds go away. And no decision tonight, a lack of a decision tonight, is a little bit of a decision to do that. So I'm just kind of stressing the imperativeness that we walk out of here tonight with something. Be great if we can all be aligned on it. And I remind we need, you know, a supermajority of 4-1 in order to get something to pass. So kind of with that structure around here and knowing how much time this board has already spent being a part of it, discussing it, you know, talking with Mr. Hostler and hearing how much certain board members have been talking to him. I know, you know, how much thought I've given to this in my own reflection. And, you know, as part of trying to get to a decision, you know, try to structure this conversation, because I myself have probably changed my mind 2 or 3 times even today. So what I'm going to do to manage this is, you know, to start the conversation, we're going to follow Robert's Rules of Order and start with a motion. And he was willing to put a motion on the table that we can focus our conversation on. The floor is open for that motion.
You're looking for a motion of approving one of the 5 options?
That's right.
Oh, okay. Well, could I do a point of order, though? Could I ask for thoughts and discussion from each of us now that we've had some extra time? Because like you said, you've changed your mind several times, and I can easily argue one, and then I can easily talk about the other 4. And I would benefit, before supporting a motion, hearing where my other board members have landed in this struggle before. I mean, does that make it a nightmare for you? I'm not ready to say, yeah, let's go ahead and talk about B.
Yeah, my intention of doing it this way is that we focus on one. We'll still have that discussion. We can vote. If it doesn't pass, we start again.
Okay, all right, well, let's do the easy one then.
And we can bring up, if one doesn't make it, we can bring up another one again.
Okay, so let's do an easy one
But my
then.
intent here also is not to go through every single one. My intent here is to focus on the one that a board member feels the strongest on.
Oh, well, then I'm not prepared to do that.
I understand.
I'm still mushy.
I'm prepared to make a motion that, without all the resolution, that the board would pursue the 8-year, $2 million incremental at $500,000 a year. Incremental increase for 8 years.
Okay.
Wait, what? Which one is that?
What we refer to as
D.
D.
So I would move
Okay.
option D.
So $2 million a year, 8 years. correct?
That's the motion, yes.
Okay.
So do we have a second?
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay.
Thanks,
Motion
Lori.
moved. We have a second. Now, discussion. I'd say Ms. Roland Miller, with your motion.
And I began and have shifted back to how do we ensure that we're not, the 13.5 million. I do know that this is option D. I'm aware of that. I'm aware of the importance of what is on the line. But I'm also aware that one of the things that we hear continually from the community is that the constant asks are wearing. They are wearing on kind of the noise of it in our community. The constant thinking about what's next, the long-term planning that the community has asked for. I feel that the additional $500,000 ask is reasonable. It's a little bit more than what we've been doing, but it is at the I'm gonna have to get all the details.
420 a month.
At the 420 a month
400.
versus the 3, which is what we are currently doing, I feel that that's a reasonable ask to adjust the revenue for the school district in a way that begins to at least try to address the inflationary needs. We know that this doesn't match the inflationary needs of the district. We also know that state funding isn't at 100% yet. We know that even at 100%, it still leaves a lot of responsibility in the laps of the local property owners. With the bottom line is if you look at the 5-year budget, we need more funds. This would allow us to not have another operational levy on the ballot until 2030, which gives us time to see all of those unknown variables right now play out. What is going to happen? Are we ever going to get 100% of funding from the state? What happens at the state? We know our representatives and congressional people will change. We don't know what they're going to do in the next few years. We don't know how growth will continue in the city. It doesn't seem that it's really going to shift significantly. We don't know the impact of the voucher program on the student body in the school. We don't know the impact yet of the workforce education shift of focus at the high school level. All of that gives us time to let that play out a little bit before we go back to the voters for another ask for operational funds. I think that the outcome of this structuring of the operating levy, it's a similar structure, a slight increase of what we're already doing, and it allows, one of our other priorities have been to allow new property valuation that is added to our community, all the growth, to offset existing property owners' taxes. We know that that happened in the last incremental levy with the decrease of the millage against what was asked for in the ballot. So this allows existing property owners to get a little bit of a break from that growth, so it includes that growth. While protecting the students' educational experience, the educational experience in the classroom, the educational experience outside of the classroom. We know that leadership and who we are formed with as students happens both in what we learn as well as those interactions and the other experiences that we have. It also, again, gives us that 8 years to take a look at the PI levy, to take a look at what the facilities and how the decisions at the state are affecting that. And it also allows property owners to maintain their value. I think the Toledo Blade editorial is really helpful in lining out what's at stake for those of us who own property right now if our district is not kept at the level it is. We are, the language was always back in the day a destination district, but that That is why we have good property values, and to let the school district slip from that if we don't have the funding we need will only hurt every existing property owner in this community. So I've looked at all of these. I've run spreadsheets on my own to try to understand the impact, what the increased cost will be. And at the end of the day, this is the only one that addresses really all the priorities that we laid out over the last few meetings. I think if there are targeted reductions in spending, it also gives us time to look at that and to set criteria and what our assessments are going to be based on. Right now, we really are not set up to, I think, effectively and fairly in a way that is based on anything but our own opinions and not any data points make cuts. And so I think this also gives us a window, at least until 2030, to, we could begin setting those assessment expectations now, and take a look at those over the next couple years that I know were raised. But right now, we're not in any position to cut programming without understanding the true effectiveness of it or the impact of those cuts.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Roland Miller. Other discussion?
Well, I can maybe add a couple of things. But first, Randy, refresh my memory. So I'm looking at the levy cycle forecast replacement chart for C and for D, Tom, to give you an idea of where I'm looking at here. So and your spaghetti graph, isn't that what they're called, spaghetti graph?
A mess.
A mess. You helped me understand that both options C and D, and for all of you here, C is basically the same thing as D, but C is 6 years, D is 8 years. And in 2030, according to the spaghetti chart, was that both of them end up not giving us enough money. But I'm looking at this.
Well,
You know which one I'm looking at? This one.
let me think I can help you, Sue. So whether it's a 6-year or 8-year, from a revenue standpoint, run out of money at the same time. The 8-year gives us 2 more years, a look ahead and secured the funding. But in that meantime, where you have time to address whether what's happening in Columbus, you have time to address, tightening of the belt and other things that could get us out 8 years. So essentially the difference between the two is the 2 more years of, so the gap out at 32 is smaller, right? But the gap at 30 is the same.
So those changes that if we had to make changes is smaller.
Right, and I think that's the point. As the farther out we get, the predictability goes down, right?
Right.
It's not even linear, it's probably exponential as the predictability goes down. So 2 years out, we've secured funding for those 2 years. In the meantime, we're working on these other things, and then, things like enrollment and stuff in Columbus are coming more clear. So is there a good chance you can make it out to 8 years without new money? Yes, but we don't know, right? Right now, based on today's assumptions, we know we're pretty comfortable we can get to 6 years. So the 2 years just gives us 2 years of more, something to plan for a smaller gap.
Okay, so, but looking at I'm looking at it incorrectly. So if it's going to be running tight on funds in 30, we would be on the ballot for new funds or a little extra help fall of 29, right?
Right.
Okay, see, your time with me wasn't totally wasted. So, and that's the same for both C and D, but what you explained to me also was that if we didn't want to go to the ballot at that time, we can always make cuts that would be equal to the tiny ask, like a mill or 1 1/4 mills or something like that. And if we didn't, if the board then, because we're making a decision here for a very future board, if that board didn't feel that that was the right time for a little extra boost or whatever, they could make $1 million or so in cuts.
And I think as Ms. Roland Miller mentioned, you know, it's even looking at the programming and stuff, right? We have time without knee-jerking to look at that, because small reductions, or if we don't have growth, we have hiring freeze, whatever those options are, early on, you're talking about fiscal years 27, 28, small changes in those years have big impacts in years 30 and 31. So your potential of getting all 8 years without a new ask could be pretty good if that's what the board wants to do, right? It comes down to what's the board's intentions.
So both options C and D give us 26, 27, 28, 29, where it's blank and there's no ask. The thing that I pointed out in our previous discussion was that there is no discussion in any of these scenarios of the obvious need for an additional building, upgrades to our elementaries. So there is a bond in here somewhere that a board is going to have to work with. And I think that's part of the beauty of the 8-year, because it does give you that room to work. So I think y'all know that I just screamed in here at 5:35 a little bit ago from Columbus and attended a most incredible conference. And one of the things and we talked about everything under the sun. We talked about your field too, that a big thing, there were 3 main things about teacher and staff retention. And the number 2, it was either number 2 or number 3, it wasn't number 1. Number 2 or number 3 was financial stability. And I thought, well, that's exactly what the 3 of us talked about just the other day, was which one gives us financial stability? Because if we are going to cut the district at the knees with option A, and maybe even A1, that puts us into such incredible financial instability that we're already every district is, not just us, but why would new teachers, 1, want to come and be thrown into a trailer, and 2, think, okay, I'm going to spend maybe a half a year or a year here, and then I'm going to get canned because I'll get ripped. And I'm thinking, okay, all right, so this is something I think we must consider in this decision, that financial stability is a real thing. In this presentation today, the guy didn't just throw out platitudes. He spent his 50 minutes with nothing but stuff like that. Just data points, charts, graphs, everything from all over the country, but especially Ohio. And it was fascinating to listen to him talk, and it was good to see it in graph form. So in having this in the back of my head, it made me lean a little bit more towards C and D. D is the most logical. 11 years on the board, we've been criticized for not planning ahead. We've been criticized for not looking beyond the hand in front of our face. We've been criticized for not acting like our growth is a surprise. Well, that's not really true since I've been on the board, and this whole levy stuff we've been talking about for at least 2.5 years. So this isn't new, it's not a surprise. C and D offer the most logical, financially stable, responsible way to run and keep Perrysburg School District, in my opinion. The advantage to C is that it's a little shorter. People would have a chance a little sooner to talk about it again. I get that. But if there is no good answer, or if they're all answers and you have to pick the best one, D is really the one and only most logical. If, like I say, if you come to the point in 29, or as Randy's watching in 27 and 28, that it looks like, depending on what's going on in the educational universe at that time, high school busing can be cut. There's $1 million. And that could keep you from doing an ask at that point. I hate to impute onto a future board, but I also don't want to give a future board, our district, and our students further heartburn at not having the programs that they need. We talked about supplementals, and I hear that word a lot, but I realized what the significance was of it. And I'm sharing with you guys some of our conversation because I just think it's important. You can take, what was it, Randy? It was about $1 million, wasn't it, for supplementals? But and you think, okay, well, good. Less ticket takers, or do it all digitally or whatever. Yeah, but when you get rid of the supplemental, you get rid of the advisors, you get rid of the coaches, you get rid of the people who run the programs. If the people who run the programs are gone, ergo, so are the programs. And so you're talking all sports, all extracurriculars, all that stuff that are run by all those people. And that's the heart of Perrysburg schools. That's what makes us and makes our kids so happy, and gives them the roundabout things that they can become more than just a book learner. And I think that's really important. When we left, I think you had me in the C column from our last conversation. When I initially studied this, I jumped into B because it wasn't a new ask, but it was longer. I didn't pull B out. B's pretty much where we're at right now. It would give us 26, 27, 28, where we wouldn't have an issue on the ballot, but we would definitely need new funds by 29 because it's not enough. So you'd be on the ballot in 28.
And I can interject something.
Yeah.
One thing we've not talked about, and Ms. Larimer mentioned the bond issue. Remember, in the budget, in the forecast, part of the, there's money in increased capital spending in there because of trailers and other spaces that we're going to need for students. So one of the things, when you think about it, is if we can get that planning cycle out and get the bond issue that would itself have a positive impact potentially on that operating budget, where we can not have to spend capital out of the operating budget, right? It's just something it just hit me now. We hadn't talked about it, but we think about, we doubled and tripled the capital spending out of the operating general fund in the next couple of years, next 3-4 years. So when you're talking about trying to extend out relief as long as you can, that's one consideration in there.
There is a slide in the spring levy presentation, and you may have even used it in the fall, that still so impacted me, that coming right off of World War II, all the heartburn that was involved with that, and the tragedies and everything else, that in the 50s, this community built for us not one, but 2 elementary schools. And, I mean, the 50s were a positive time period, true, and we are not in a positive time period now. But those people sacrificed for the future students to build us 2 elementary schools. And I just think, I mean, all the students that have and are and will be benefiting from that generation in the 1950s is really kind of moving. That's kind of remarkable. And now we find ourselves to be able to be in that position too, where we can do for Perrysburg's future and our future community, which is rapidly growing. Just drive down Caronade. It's our opportunity to say thank you to the 1950s generation and learn from them. That slide really, that's really stuck with me. That's a lot of words to say. I'm still mushy. I could still be interested in maybe something else, but that's kind of where I'm at as far as supporting this. Then you've got the logic of, do we do D, which is the most financially responsible, the most financial stability, gives future boards the best ability to make the decisions that they will have to make? Or do we only focus on what we think can pass? And if we do that, if we go that mentality, to me, option A is a total 0. It has no support from me at all. I would vote no against option A. You didn't include A1, but A1 would be the lowest I would go, would be A1. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'll be quiet.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Larimer. Other board members' comments?
You're doing a lot of writing. You need to say something.
I don't have much more to say than what, I mean, I'm not going to keep saying what we've said. I mean, we went between C and D at the last meeting. Again, D is the most logical. It's going to keep Perrysburg. Looking back at, I'm looking at the slides that you referenced, and it's still shocking to me that we have almost, almost 3,000 acres of developable land yet. And you can see how the city is supporting us when we request them to not approve changing commercial to residential.
Yeah, that was kind of a shock.
It was a shock. While we would love to have something like Amazon dollars that Rossford has, the way that city council is going, that's not going to happen. They don't appear to be helping us at all.
And it's not just us, it's the city services too,
Right.
because they're suffering with this too.
And just looking at that we have a potential of 7,600 more residents by 2040. I'm not going to just talk to talk, but, I agree with what you said. That's why I was writing down, what you said. And, Mrs. Roland Miller, you had great points as well. So I fully support D as what's best for the community and what's best for our kids. We weren't voted to do we weren't voted here to do A or option 1 or option A1. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to do what's best for our students and to keep the services that we have and to keep Perrysburg.
Well, I totally agree with what you're saying, but I do think that A1 has an advantage insofar, and I didn't print A1 out, has an advantage in that it is a continuing, and it secures that 13.5 million. I think that's really important. And it kind of leans towards my two schools of thought between which one's more yes, which one's more right. And securing that 13.5 million is important. But it's very short-sighted. It's very, very heavy levy fatigue, because there would be a levy in 24, 25, 26, 30, and 31, and that does not include a bond. And that's exhausting. That's exhausting. So in November of 26, you would have to add a levy request for more funds. Does A1 also include the 3 million in cuts, or is that, you wouldn't need to do the 3 million in cuts if a 1.25 mil request was passed? Am I getting things mixed up?
No, you're correct. So on the screen, this is from the last board meeting, and this is A1. And it would anticipate in 26, as you pointed out, Ms. Larimer, the need for funds, and the variation between this and option A would be, no new funds, and then a 4-year renewal of the 2019 expiring levy.
Dr. Rufford, anything else?
Talking just again about D, and we talk about levy fatigue, it allows for, more financial planning, I think, as well, because you know what's coming, and you know what you're able to plan for. And if it's, I'm an English teacher by trade, not math, but at 1470, I think my math is, if I could look at my house, and we're not going anywhere for at least the next 5 years till I can retire, if not later than that, that's another $14 a month for us.
For D?
For D.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I can budget $14 a month and figure that out. But that helps us figure out what we're gonna have, what's coming. And it's not up, down, if it's gonna change. And and it's not, while the number looks big, it's not overwhelming at $14 a month for our house. And if
So
anybody
two-
wants to do the math, that's approximately $350,000.
Yeah. Just 2 trips to Starbucks, as Randy pointed out.
So that's it for me.
Ms. Menke?
Yes. I'm just going to state again, as a board, that we need to make some budget cuts to prove to our constituents that we are serious about making their tax dollars work. In discussions since our last meeting with people out in the public and other board members from other districts and administration, a big discussion with them was the cutting of what they brought in with their ESSER and ARP funds. I spoke to a superintendent just yesterday about they were cutting $1 million from their budget of a $13 million budget. That is a 7.69% cut in their budget that they know they have to make. I think for goodwill towards our constituents, that we do need to look at making cuts. I do believe that we can make cuts. I think we can do it also without being threatening. We threw up that list last time, and the main thing that I got back from anyone who viewed the meeting was that why are they always going to things that are going to harm the students right away? Is there anything else that we can look at? They just feel all the time like they're being threatened. They don't like that feeling. And they're fine, when you talk to them about it, about whether we do cuts or we throw up what we have presented here, especially with C and D, they would rather have the opportunity to say yes or no in a shorter amount of time as we have growth. Again, I think that we need to be very vigilant with the PI that's going to be coming on. We also know that because of the age of our buildings, the PI that we currently have is really not enough to take care of what we have. And we know, again, I will say it, we needed a bond issue yesterday for the growth of our district, for the age of our buildings. I believe that if we do this $2 million incremental at 6 or 8 years, that we are taking away our chances for increasing a PI or passing a bond issue. I think we just need to buckle down like everybody else has within the community when it comes to spending. Everyone has learned to do this over the years, over the past probably 3-4 years because of COVID. The increase in household expenses. I mean, we see over the past week watching the number of businesses that are going to be closing. These are hitting our homes in our community. We need to show that we can tighten our belt also. They're going to take us more seriously. I know we want to be out further so we can make plans, but currently, right now, with the economy and finances, I do not think that's possible.
That was, excuse me, you are at a board meeting, and I expect you guys to behave, please. This is hard. We have spent a lot of time on this. Give us the ability to do our jobs for you and talk about this, okay? Please. That's what we're trying to do.
We're not
Maria,
gonna go
please.
We're,
We're not, this is a special meeting, so we do not have conversations at special meetings.
So we're
This
gonna-
is between us.
okay. Thank you, Ms. Menke. Anything else? Okay.
So I have a, you brought up an interesting way of looking at this. If we keep everything, so you're still looking at
I'm still looking at A. And it
at
is with
A or
the
A1?
A, and it is with the understanding that we are going to come back in the time period that that levy lasts to ask for more money, but we need to get ourselves out at least another year and see what the economy is doing before we ask people for more money. Or, I mean, if the economy is not doing great, then again, we might have to ask for, or we might have to go ahead and implement cuts. It is not pretty. I don't like doing this, but it's something that I've learned in the past that you have to do because you have to have a balanced budget. We have to have a good 5-year forecast. It's the tough part of being a board member. I wish I could say it's always roses. I'd love an open purse, but it's just not always possible. I have to say, over my years of being a board member, this period is probably the most stable when it comes to funding for schools, which I really appreciate. In the past, I mean, I just remember, you know, even within the biennial budget, year after year, you didn't know which way you were standing, and I have seen it shift, and it was usually down. Luckily, when it comes to funding from the state, we're at a good spot. But economically, we are not in a good spot.
So okay, so I pulled up A, and so we didn't really talk about this one, Randy and Tom. So in 2025, it lists that we would have to do $3 million of reductions. Is that in 2025, or plan it to be $3 million of reductions for '26?
26.
Well, 25 is already started. Well, it starts next week, July 1st.
Okay.
So
So
it's not 3 million next year. We were talking about how to extend the past 4 years. That's where that came in. Okay?
That's reflected on the screen right there. So those would begin to,
Oh, that's a little.
so we have a little bit of a challenge in explaining because we have the tax year for Ohio and federal taxes is run from January 1 to December 31st. The state of Ohio runs a fiscal year that begins, I think, July 1. And then we have school years, which are split between, the beginning of August through May. So it's challenging to explain because Randy talks in one language, we talk school year, he talks school district year, and then you throw taxes in there of when collections will take place. So the screen here shows that in 2026, that's when we'd have to implement those, which really begins the year before with notices and planning, for those reductions.
So if I remember correctly, in order to do that 3 million, that was at least well, let me rephrase that. That would be roughly 130 staff members.
No.
No,
That 13 million is based on, 130 staff members based on 13.5 million.
Oh,
It's equivalencies, and, we gotta be careful about that because we use that because that's an easy number. Though, put in perspective, you could cut capital spending, you could cut purchase supplies, you can cut purchase services, you don't cover 13.5 million. So you have to get into personnel, and a certified staff member is probably somewhere between 75 and 100,000. So $13 million divided by 100 or so is 130. That's where you come up with that number.
Okay.
So 3 million is gonna be 30, right?
okay. So,
And if it's classified staff, it's more like 2 to 1.
okay. So if, the other comment that kind of struck me was why does it look like our cuts are always hurting students? So if you don't cut programs or things like supplementals, which cuts the programs, that losing those programs is hurting the students. If you cut the staff, how is that not hurting students? Because they're now going to be in overcrowded classrooms. The teachers will quit because they're overworked at 25 kids in a class, let alone having 30 kids in a class. We won't be able to hire assistants or aides for them in a classroom because we can't. I don't see the logic in the statement of why do you always cut programs that hurt kids? You make cuts, you're going to hurt the kids in this district no matter what we do. You're on finance, you're on operations, you've seen in great detail the depth and the magnitude that these two departments make hundreds of thousands of dollars of cuts every time they make a report. And then when I came in to talk to you two in the pouring rain, Jason was standing at the door only to say, hi, I can't talk, I just got a call, I gotta get to the high school because they lost power. We're looking at probably at least a $25,000 repair. To me, that's what makes this, this being A, or even, no, I'll stick with A, somewhat appealing. I can understand why people might look at that one and say, okay, you're doing cuts, you're going to do this and all that. But to me, it's so irresponsible for the sanctity of this incredible district. A1 is basic, isn't A1 the same? And in the way that looks as A is, except for the fact that you'll only see the operational one time, and then you don't see the orange thing anymore, so isn't that the only difference between them? Is that A1?
Correct. So what, with A, with four-year levy cycle, it, one of the challenges that was brought up last time, and it's illustrated here, is that there would be a number of levies that would occur in this window just to collect the exact same dollar amount we're collecting today. So it wouldn't provide additional dollars, but yet there would be, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 levies in this window just to collect the same amount of money. So one, that becomes levy fatigue for voters, because it's, why are you on the ballot again? Well, it's not a new levy, but it is a renewal, and people like that. But again, it is 5 levies in 10 years or 8 years or 9 years, whatever the window is here. And it doesn't provide much opportunity to discuss future revenue, because if you, as it was suggested here, if you added, a new levy for new money, at some point it becomes, where do you drop it in to this calendar? Because now you're talking about 6 levies in 8 years. So we're on the ballot virtually every year in this scenario if you throw in and ask for new money, either it be a bond issue or operational.
Okay, and so what I found intriguing of what you said, Laura, was throwing in a bond issue in that colorful mess up there, and that because we need a bond issue. Well, we offered the bond issue in the spring. That was a perfect levy.
But we offered a bond issue that was still outside of what people can afford.
In the spring?
In the spring,
Wasn't it less than what we're offering now?
it was turned down,
Point of order.
and I believe that is what our constituents are telling us.
Okay, we're gonna bring this back. We're not gonna start relegating, a spring bond issue. I mean,
No, I'm trying to find the logic as to why she's still stuck on A and wants to throw a bond issue into there. And for a moment there, I could see some logic in that. Well, if you're making cuts and you're only getting 4 years of the 13.5 million, then putting in the bond issue with an operational for that bond issue, then I could see some sense in what she was saying, but the details kind of fall apart for me.
Are you saying that there's not one thing that can be cut?
I think I want to just point out, and I'm going to go back to what we've heard over the last year. I think it's dangerous to say at a public meeting that cuts haven't been made, that cost, and I think we need to talk about costs savings and cuts, which are 2 different things to me. There has been a significant amount of cost savings generated this year. We've heard that through operations. We've heard that in the financial statements that are brought. There's been a lot of extra revenue not projected due to the finance office, Mr. Drewer's good stewardship of the funds that we do have and in the investment income that has been generated. So we talked about this after the last meeting, Ms. Menke, but to not acknowledge the fact that there is significant effort and close attention being given to costs and ensuring that we're not spending money that we don't have to. And that's why I said when I presented D, we need, as a board, we need to establish what are our expectations, what are our data points for what is working and what's not. Those don't exist right now. So for my fear, if we were to start cutting positions, most of which we can't cut, but if the small handful, the only way that you can really generate any savings would be to cut positions that are all attached to programs. And right now, I don't have data points that say programs aren't working and therefore need to be cut. And that's why I asked after the last meeting, if you want to propose A, I would need a list of what those cuts are in order to go with that scenario, because right now, I don't see where they are that would generate enough savings, one side or the other, to allow option A to be feasible.
Yeah.
And without that list of, we're going to cut these things and this is the data points and this is why, I will not cut student programming because it will affect the students. So I need data points, and those don't exist right now. And I've not been presented, you don't have that. Therefore, option A, I'm going to go back in my support of option D, which is the motion that's on the
The
floor.
opposite of A, yeah.
And when I think about, when I tie together this idea, cost controls is going to have to come,
Yep.
because I'll tie it back to the bond discussion that we touched on here. We're a growing district. What do I believe? I believe, city council's made it clear they're going to continue to, we're going to continue to see new residents, new housing, new development. This district's going to continue to grow. Because of that growth, those students are going to need some place to have a seat. And it has been clear that, 2 bond levies, building new schools is not what this community wants today. So that cost containment comes from the fact that more dollars are going to come from our general fund to put these kids in trailers to support, it's what we do. We have space, children come into that space, teachers come in, support staff come in to educate those students. That's what a school district does. So that takes me in the direction of, well, $140 million bond issue was too much, $80 million bond issue was too much. Essentially asking for $2 million a year here in support of kind of that space growth as well, to help make up for what those trailers that are going to go to the general fund are going to cost, as well as the inflationary impact of supplies and other things that the district incurs, and to support that growth. And I have a little different take on state funding has never been more stable. I do believe that we are at the very least on the doorstep, if not through the threshold, of some of the most volatile state spending or state school support funding environment that we have ever seen in the state of Ohio. And I believe that dollars will continue to shift locally as the state continues to step back from funding public schools. That's what I believe. Those are probably in addition to some other valid points that I heard from here, is where I tend to say, in order to give this community transparency and certainty as to what the future tax requests are going to be of this district, I'm in favor of doing something that is as long as possible. I'm probably in a $2 million continuing mode, but I don't want to step on that. I'm not here to bring up new options. We're here to make a decision tonight. But that takes me into providing clarity over the longest term possible in order to give this district time to plan, give this district time to make what cuts may need to be made due to the increased facility needs. I cringe every time I see another boiler went out for $50,000, $25,000. That's going to continue to happen. We have a PI levy that is not going to be enough to cover those, so that's going to start or continue to go through the general fund. I want to keep the educational experience of our students excellent, and I think an incremental levy is a way that does that in a growing district at $4.20 a month on a $100,000 home. That will decrease. That's not just an opinion. That is a fact. That those dollars will decrease as the community grows, as more people come in, and they'll continue to come in. So that is where I give my support. That's where I'm at.
And it doesn't mean that we wouldn't make cuts if there needed to be, if something
The one thing I didn't like
changed.
about, at the regular meeting, the one thing I didn't like about option D was that that ask that was out there in the 7th year. And, you know, that's 2 levies right there during that time period, which is where I kind of lean towards option C. And it was until, you know, Mr. Drewer said at the end of the meeting, he's like, you know, the accountability comes from, you know, there'll be 3 school board elections coming up to then. That will be up to a future board to say, do we want that in 2020, and I'm lost in my years here, in the 7th year or not? You know, there'll be plenty of opportunities for the community to weigh in on, and plenty of opportunities for community members to step up and say, you know, here's what I believe about, you know, the future funding as well, those future levy requests. But this at least, this is, and I've heard, Ms. Larimer, I believe you said it, option D is the most physically, financially responsible action this board should take. In my world, you make that request, then you have a campaign, and that's the chance for people to talk about it. You make the ask of the community, and you let the community decide. This board's job is to come together to collectively give the best option we feel we can provide the community to make the decision on.
I do want to clarify that I do recognize that we have some employees who have gone out of their way to find some unbelievable cost reductions, also to find us some grants for items that we know that we're going to have to spend money on. For example, like replacing the buses. When it comes to a cuts list, that is something that involves the administration. It's not a 1 or 2 week thing. It's a multi-month work session and getting in the weeds. It's not just something, and you know, like you said, you have to look at the data and look at what gives us the most bang for our buck and rate it that way. It's not just a, I want a list type of thing. It can't be produced overnight.
But I think you have to make a decision based on logic and what information we do have. And we've been bringing loads of information since I've been on the board of the number of cost savings that has occurred and the number of grants. I mean, operations is just kicking butt on.
But what's the
these
percentage of
grants.
that compared to our actual budget?
That's a Randy question.
Again, let's think about what's going on here, that all those things are small, right? Relatively speaking, personnel is the only way you can cut significantly, because 85% of our budget is personnel.
Because we're a people thing.
We deliver
A service.
education. We don't make widgets, and right. And 85% of our budget is personnel. I mean, that's what it is. That's what we've talked about. You can cut everything else out, and you don't balance. It doesn't add up to $13.5 million. And as we talked about in finance last meeting, we spend over $12 million just in special education. That is not negotiable, right? So we get a little bit back in. Well, I say little. We get a fourth of it from federal and state sources. So $9 million, direct costs. So it's still over 10% of our budget without blinking an eye. And that's another one of those unknowns, right? Because it's like special education. It's based on the student. Every student's need is going to define what those services are, and rightly so, because public education, we provide a free and appropriate education for every child in the least restrictive environment possible. And so, that's our mandate. So going back to, yes, we're doing all these things, watching the pennies, and the personnel stuff, it's hard to see because you don't see the no's. All you see is the yeses. But I can tell you, we say no more often than we say yes in this district. And I can tell you it's a modus operandi since I've been here. Every time we have a position open, we're asking, do we need to fill the position? Make a case to fill the position. And, and again, we're not filling a fraction of the positions that the building are asking for, the administrators are asking for. So is it enough? That's debatable, right? But those efforts are ongoing. And again, it's just like in a business, we're a growing business. I've never seen a growing business be able to cut costs and grow at the same time. It's just difficult, right?
Well, I think our TESOL program is a good example of that. So many of the students that were coming in are English language learners, and two teachers they were handling, what, 125 students for two teachers? I mean, that was, and from K through 12. So we can't close our doors. They come, we have to find the people to help them. So it was mandatory. We had to get a third TESOL teacher. So those types of things are what our kind of growth and our kind of a community necessitate, right? You're my HR go-to person besides Don. Was this thing from the conference that I went to today, that financial stability is something that your people are looking forward to when they are looking to be hired into a district?
Obviously, of course.
Okay.
That is one of the biggest things for recruitment and retention. And you made a point. We are a public school. We have to take everybody who comes through our door. We can't kick them out. We can't send them somewhere else. We get them all the time from private schools because they don't meet their requirements or meet, whatever they want in a private school. We have to take everybody. It doesn't matter what time of year. You can't close the door because we're out of money. We don't have classrooms. You have to take them. And when you talk about special education, like you said, it's, you're spinning the wheel. You don't know. If you have a child who has, severe needs, we know that we get a fraction of the cost from the state, but you have to provide free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. And you're right. People forget that. We're a public school. We cannot close our doors, period.
One lady made a real interesting point today that, because there was a lot of talk about CTE, career technical education, and the satellites that some districts are doing, or we have PENA. And as we learned this year, some of our kids can go there, but if it doesn't work out, or if they don't follow the rules over at PENA, they come back. So even the CTE schools can send kids back to their home school, and I hadn't really thought about that. And we have to be prepared and be ready for them. I don't know. I think you're doing a good job there, Eric and Susan, in saying that. I mean, I really can see the high logic for D. I really can.
Okay, well, thank you all for your comments. So I acknowledge everybody up front here is in support of public education. It is how we fund it, which is where this debate lies. So to that end, I am ready to call the question, a motion for the resolution of necessity for an 8-year, $2 million incremental levy. Roll call, please.
Ms. Susan Rowland Miller,
Yes.
Dr. Lori Reffert,
Yes.
Ms. Sue Larimer,
Yes.
Ms. Laura Menke,
No.
Mr. Eric Bennington.
Yes, the resolution passes. I want to thank all of you for coming tonight, having, yet another spirited discussion, as well as coming to a conclusion. I'd like to thank the participants for coming to observe. There will be plenty more conversation about this in the community. Unless I hear an objection, I'm going to move that we adjourn this meeting. We are adjourned.
Thank you.